Hello and welcome backstage to the tutors room at Ethology Institute. Today we'd like to show you how we discuss topics, we exchange ideas, we argue forth and back and reach conclusions. Well, sometimes. Our goal each day is to become a little less ignorant. Stress is a reaction from the organism to establish homeostasis, balance somehow. It's a mechanism which is needed for all living organisms to survive. Without a good stress mechanism, you cannot survive. New things stress you up. Stress goes like this all the time, all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. That's our normal reaction. All organisms. What can be wrong sometimes is when stress goes there and stays there. That is too much. And if stress goes down and stays too down, this is also wrong because it means that impairs your ability to react and even your ability of learning. I wrote 2 articles about that. Please go to the ethology.eu to articles and read them. It's an introduction. And then I give a link to for those of you that would like to know a little bit more. But just summing up here, a healthy stress mechanism is necessary for the survival. The statement is, the ideal training environment is the one with the lowest amount of stress. And then you have 5 possibilities to cast your vote, from totally agree to totally disagree. And you have the neutral also, which is neither agree nor disagree. So this is my first question to you. And the second is, how do you handle the stress question when training an animal? So, Michael, first, the ideal training environment is one with the lowest amount of stress. Agree, disagree, whatever, and what you do about it.
I disagree with that statement, and I disagree mostly because it's false, but also partially because I work primarily in the sport dog world, so I'm mostly view stress as something to utilize to produce a good performance. Rather than seeing it as something detrimental to my dog. So I'm usually trying to optimize my stress in my dogs to create a good performance.
So when you see it's false, you would say that the ideal training environment is one with the highest amount of stress?
That's also false. No, you want an optimal level of stress.
Okay. In a while, I'm going to ask you, can think about that, how you do that in a practical situation. But let's hear what Roberto has to say.
Yes, I also disagree. Even I put that neither agree or disagree. But
that's my fault. That's my fault, Roberto. Sorry.
Yes. And why? Because it was a very tricky question. Because it's all depends, and it all will has to do with what we want to do with the dogs. For instance, Michael can see that in a sports view. Other people can see in a competition. I can also see in a law enforcement view. So that's that kind of perspective that made me to choose that. To the sentence itself, yes, I disagree. I also goes to the optimal level of stress.
Thank you very much. Let's take the next tutor, Tilda. Agree, disagree, whatever. And how do you handle stress in your normal practice with dog owners, horse owners, guinea pig owners? You take care of everybody, cat owners. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, in general, the most optimal amount of stress would be to teach new skills in a low environment, in a low stress environment, and then gradually, when it's already taught, and gradually increase the stressing environment, to a more stressing environment. And with horses, according to what you spoke about earlier, the life-saving, that how stress can be life-saving. Imagine a horse that just act like nothing if a predator is nearby. So it's really crucial that the animal can show stress, and sometimes it's very useful that it's able to be in a very stressing environment and then still respond efficiently. So.
Very good. Thank you very much for your opinion, which adds a lot to this meeting here. We're going to ask Anna now. Anna, agree, disagree, whatever, and how do you deal with it?
I chose the neither agree or disagree, but after thinking and pondering, I would change to disagree, because like Roberto and Michael said, you need an optimal level of stress to perform certain tasks. Yes. But I think that we have to adapt that level of stress to the task and the dog and the environment.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
Very good, Anna. And let me emphasize one thing for our students here. A very commendable attitude of Anna, because this happens. She has one opinion, and then she gets arguments, she gets new evidence, whatever, and then she says the opinion. There is nothing wrong with that at all, nothing. So just one thing, Robert, you said it was tricky. What is tricky about that, Roberto? Can you please explain?
It was very generalistic question. Which species we were speaking about, which environment, there's a lot of factors.
You say it's tricky, and I would now challenge you guys. I would say exactly the opposite. I would say there is nothing tricky about that. It's just a common sentence. The ideal training environment is the one with the lowest amount of stress. Hey, what's special about that? It's just a normal sentence. Hey, come on, either you agree or disagree, or you don't agree, or you are very much in, or you are very much against. Hey, what's tricky about that? Michael, would you like to answer that?
Answer the idea that it's tricky?
Well, you don't think it's tricky, right?
Well, I think it's a little tricky.
A little tricky. Why?
I think I intentionally left out details to see if we can fool people's like their kind of their way of normally thinking. Like, how many people just assumed I was talking about a dog specifically, even though there's no mention of a dog in there?
Yeah. Jessica, go ahead.
I was going to say I assumed it was a dog. I was tricked also.
You and Benny, actually, if you look at it, most people immediately go to dogs, you know. Why? This is very important. Thank you very much, Jessica. That is a good one. Now, Michael, tricky, yeah, well, I would still say there is nothing tricky about that. This is just the ideal training environment is the one with the lowest amount of stress. Just a normal sentence.
It is.
Well, yeah, it's a normal sentence if you read it. That's the question, that's the problem. But you know what? Most people don't read it like that. Most people only see training, lowest stress. That's what they see. Training, lowest stress. Now imagine that the sentence was, the ideal training environment is one with the highest amount of stress. What would you vote? There is nothing tricky about the sentence, but our brain is a tricky one. Because you see, we change suddenly to the ideal training environment is one with the highest amount of stress, and then we have no problem with that. It's wrong, disagree, disagree, disagree. But if you disagree with that, why do you do not disagree with the lowest? Unless, of course, your opinion is that it should always be the lowest. But that's not the case. So if it's not the case, what should you write? Disagree, right? It's interesting.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning there's another trick that our brain plays with us, that we think that disagreeing with that proposition means agreeing with the opposite.
Yes.
So, and we make that mistake all the time. So, for example, let's see if I can find an example that's not offensive. So, if I say something like, "I like oranges," that doesn't mean I dislike apples. I can like both. So, just because you agree with one doesn't mean you automatically agree. So, if you disagree with the lowest amount of stress, that doesn't mean you think it should be the highest.
No.
That it's a false dichotomy. There aren't only two choices.
No, exactly. So, to speak about stress, Tilda, to finish the stress thing, Tilda said something about it. She said, I would start my training with low level of stress, and then I will increase it gradually until...
Would teach new skills in a low level of stress normally.
That's what she said. Teach new skills. With Tilda, you have to be very precise. I love her for that. So, to teach new skills, let me see if I can say it right. To teach new skills, you start with a low level of stress, and then you increase the stress gradually. Am I correct, Tilda?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you very much. Michael, do you agree with that? Would you do it different in your competition world?
I actually maybe do it differently. The problem is with the word low, it's not an exact amount. Lowest is an exact amount. We both disagree with lowest, but low can mean a lot of different things. And in the low stress range, I probably actually prefer to train on the high end of that because I feel I get a better performance. So another example is...
So, let me see if I understand you correct. You prefer to work on the highest of the lowest?
So I prefer to work at a level that is stimulating enough to produce a good result, but not so not too stimulating, not too understimulating. So, for example, I used to teach sheep herding dogs, and I could have taken them inside the living room and taught them the behaviors beforehand, but I actually prefer to teach them on the sheep. Even though it's a much more stimulating environment, you produce a totally different result when you teach them the basics in the presence of livestock versus away from livestock.
Okay, but do you start with one sheep or you start with 100?
You start with 3, but yeah.
Start with 3. Why do you start with 3?
Because if you only have 1, the sheep won't have the herding instinct and it'll just panic. But if you start with 3, then they will have a herding instinct and they won't panic as much.
Yes. Actually, let me tell you one thing. We tested this many, many years ago. The level of stress of the sheep increases with as the number reduces.
Yeah.
And we came to 3 actually. And 3 was the number where they had a low level of stress. Below 3, it would increase. Above 3, it would not be better. Maybe natural selection favored that. Well, I probably did, because otherwise we wouldn't have that behavior. So the 3 has a scientific foundation.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that.
You didn't know that, you see? You didn't know
I guess
that.
there's some, like, people figured it out through trial and error.
Yeah, probably they did, yeah. So, you and Tilda, are you in conflict with one another? Or
No, I think that we have different goals. And to use another example, so if I teach a dog to sit with just really simple body language and a touch on the butt, or if I teach a sit with a piece of kibble, or if I teach a sit with a hot dog, or if I teach a sit with a ball, this is almost like a sliding scale of stress.
yes.
But you can teach the dog how to sit with any of these options and you get a different response. You get a faster sit or a slower sit or a more precise sit somewhere, So depending on what your goals are, there's a lot more freedom to choose how much stress you want.
Look, I want to hear what Roberta has to say about that, but before, so that we know where we are, I want to ask Tilda, would you accept that? Would you go for that? Michael's explanation, are you okay with that?
I would say it depends on the animal, what is stressing.
Yes.
Its environment is stressing.
Depends on the animal.
The individual.
Yeah. But you also accept that it depends on the goal.
Yes, but still you can begin to teach in a low, if I can call it that. How low, then that's the question.
Well,
environment. then you
And I
might
think
work with that also.
what I'm noticing about what Tilda's saying is that she's focusing on the environment that you're in, and I'm focusing on the stress that I'm putting into the environment through what I can offer the dog.
So would you go for that the ideal optimal stress level of the environment? We're talking about the environment. Has to be adjusted to the individual in question and to the goal of the learning session. Would you both agree on that? Michael is okay with that. Tilda, can you put your fingers up too? These fingers, please, no other fingers. Okay, thank you. So now I want to hear Roberto, because look, this is very interesting. We have Tilda. Tilda is looking at it more like, because that's still the job every day. Every day she goes and looks at the animals that owners call and say, oh, help, I have this problem. And Tilda has to go there and solve the problems. And Michael is the competition guy. But then we have Roberto. Roberto is the guy that comes from the tough world of law enforcement. And well, he came from even maybe even worse. He came from the Air Force. What do you say, Roberto?
We always work on the limit. When we say the limit is not only the dog, but also the handler. When I say limit, it's almost, at least with humans, with the dogs, we try to suppose when the dog can break, if we can say like that, but was always in very high level.
Okay.
Was a kind of selection. The dogs that could not handle that, they just was putting out.
Roberto, let me say, first I want to say, Air Force, law enforcement, etc. We tend to generalize too much. I've worked with many law enforcement agencies where they have really knowledgeable and knowledge-seeking instructors and handlers, and some of them were really advanced in their way of training that. But one thing that Roberto said, and I would like to ask Michael and Till what they think about that, because to me it makes sense to a certain. Maybe we should actually bring stress always, the optimal, maybe the optimal was always to have as high stress as possible, not over the threshold, not over the top, but as high as possible without impairing the learning ability of our student. And now I say on purpose our student, because we're still talking, these guys keep talking about dogs. I don't know why, because there are other animals than dogs. There are horses, there are cats, there are guinea pigs, there are jellyfish, there are lots of animals, right?
Humans.
Humans, for instance, yes. So Michael, Tilda, what would you say about that? Let's give Tilda the word first, right? What would you say, Tilda? Is Roberto completely out of his mind?
Makes sense what you say, that if we keep it on a level where we don't go over the threshold, when you put it that way.
Okay, so but in that case, you are actually helping Michael a little bit, because you're saying that we should actually have the, if I understood it correctly, the highest of the lowest, right? The highest of, right? Yeah, highest of the lowest.
Yes.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on your goal. And I think, dealing with sport dogs, it's not the same as dealing with real working dogs like Roberto did. But my sheep herding dogs were legitimate, real working dogs. And in those cases, I think the dog's ability to cope with the level of stress is really important. So working them at the limit, knowing if your dog's going to break, like you need to know that in training before you get out in the field with the dog and the dog breaks down in a real life situation. So even if it's not the ideal training situation, like it has other benefits.
Yeah, but what you're saying basically is the same. You're just using a lot of words to say that. You go with the highest of the lowest.
And if I'm training a real working dog, I might go with a level that I think might break the dog to see if it does.
Uh-huh. You're going to get in trouble for that one, I tell you.
I know, but it's real life. I don't want the dog to break down in a situation that could be life and death.
We actually have a question real quick, you guys, and that's from Gabriella, and she wants to know, what exactly are you talking about when you say the dog breaks?
The way I'm using the word breaks is when the dog meets a level of stress that it can't cope with. And so the signs of this are the dog is no longer able to respond to known signals, that the dog avoids the situation, or with like some attack dogs, that
And you
they
think that is
attack.
and you think that is beneficial for learning?
For us learning about what the dog can handle.
Oh, let me say what Tilda has to say about that before I say something. Tilda?
Well, that gives you an answer of what the dog can, or whatever species it is, can handle. But that's a question if that's what you want.
You being
I think
very...
it's to be avoided in most pet situations.
Let's see if Anna agrees with you. Anna, what do you say?
In my personal opinion, I wouldn't put the dog in that situation, but it's my personal opinion. But I don't work with working dogs. I work in modification, in modifying behaviors, and I work in the low stress environment. And I have a question about the Michael saying that.
Anna, before you ask the question,
Okay, sorry.
No, let me sum up this to see. So
Okay.
you are also defending the position that we should go to the highest of the lowest, but without going over the top, over the threshold. Is it what you're saying?
Yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. Sorry. My opinion is that we don't put the dog over the threshold.
Okay.
We don't put the dog in a situation where he can't cope in that environment with that stimuli. But that is my personal experience. I don't work with agility or herding dogs, or I know that they have another drive and they are working dogs. So I know that they have to be put in a limit situation because in real life things happen and they have to cope with that things. But I wouldn't do that. So in my opinion, I understand Michael's opinion, but in my opinion, I won't do that with my dog.
Can I just throw out a really quick thing?
Okay, Michael, go ahead.
Okay, really quick. So, especially when you're working with working dogs, I appreciate what you're trying to say, but it's not a matter of I'd rather not put them over the threshold. It's they're going to go over threshold. Do you want to be in a safe environment or do you want to be in real life? That's the ultimate question you have to ask. And like, I'd rather not put them over threshold if I could, but I know that they're going to go over threshold if they're really working at some point.
All right, Robert, what would you say about that?
Yes, just let me make very clear that I don't do that anymore. Okay, I don't work more with in that way. But what I can see is we are speaking about sports, about companions, and about operational dogs. So they all have different goals. And now I don't want to judge anything of the kinds of trainings, but they are different goals. And I can speak only for what I did before. That was a question of life or death, including for the own dog. So not only the dog, but also the handler had the stress of their limits. So, and I saw a lot of times that the handler just gave up of the situation, but not the dog.
Okay.
Okay, because of course there's a science behind that, to work always with hind levers, because the dog will, well, the dogs that could pass sometimes very, very harsh treatments, but who could pass that, then the tendency just increase and increase.
Let me just say one thing. Kind of sum up and finish the stress discussion for today. We'll come back to it. I think that, we talk about competition, law enforcement, all that. I as you know, I've also trained the animals and the handlers I call them handlers when it's professional work. I call them owners when it's not professional work. But I did that a lot with both police forces and with the landmine detecting rats and the operations in Africa. You know what I'm talking about, right? For Apopo and tuberculosis, they did as well. And my way was always to bring them gradually, but always to bring them, let's say, one session. That session is finished when I can bring the level of stress, when I can put pressure on the student to the maximum I can without going over the threshold. Okay, that was also in my view and my experience the best result I would ever get. However, sometimes in these cases of the law enforcement and the landmines, etc., because we are training them to work, function in situations of high stress, I also want to teach them another thing, is that how do you cope when you break down? But that is a completely different thing. So I would, on purpose, at certain levels of the training, introduce the element which some people call set up to fail, where I on purpose would set up the animal to fail or the handler to fail, on purpose, to see how do they react, and then to teach them, look, you cannot avoid when you are out there, you cannot avoid that sooner or later you're going to be in a situation which is going to be above your head. You're going to fail. But you have to pull yourself together, start over, and function anyway, and get the best out of it. Because the last thing we want is you just to lay down and give up or die or whatever, you know. But that is a very specific part of the training, I would say. Very specific. And I would say too that in the case that Tilda, I'm sorry Christina is not here today, Christina would say the same, Anna, in all the training that you have daily, you do not need, in my opinion, you do not need, and for the arguments that we have used here today, to go over the threshold. I think the only situation you go over threshold when you are preparing both the animal and the handler. And it can be also, as Michael said, in situations with sheepdog, maybe, yeah. I mean, we are, after all, also dealing with the life and death many times with sheepdog. Maybe in those cases we have to teach them how to cope with breaking down.
When you're talking about setting them up to fail, to learn how they're going to handle it, how would you do that? What would you do?
I give them a task, which I know that they are not prepared to solve, to deal with. That's what I do. And I know that they're going to fail. And then I observe how they fail. And then I tell them, well, to the dog, I just have to the dog or the rat. It was also the rat or whatever, or the animal. I fail a little bit and then I go back to something. Immediately I go back to something that they can do. Because I want to teach them, hey, buddy, sometimes you fail. Hey, what's the big deal? You fail, that's it. It happens to everybody. Now, see, now you have success again. To learn to fail is as important, or maybe more important, than to learn to have success, you know. And to the handlers, on debriefing, I told them, look, I did this on purpose. I knew you couldn't do it. But that's not the most important. The most important is now how you react to it. What are you going to do about it?
Before we leave this topic, can I just defend myself for 30 seconds really quickly? Because I don't want people to leave with the impression Michael's philosophy is break the dogs and handlers. That's what he believes. My position is rather, it's very easy from the outside to criticize other people who train that way when you don't have the same responsibility and stakes on the table. And so it's I find it very difficult. I don't train real police dogs or anything like that, but I'm not going to tell them they're doing it wrong when I don't actually have to train my dog to be to perform under that level of pressure where people's lives are on the line. And so I see so many trainers saying, oh, if they just used a clicker, they could fix all the dogs. And it's like, maybe, but unless you've actually done it, don't criticize.
Okay. Okay, I don't think anybody thinks that you break the dogs because you like them, like especially. You know, this guy has the Jim Morrison looks, and he likes to live on the edge. But I tell you, he's a great trainer. He's a great thinker, and he challenges you. I know many of the gray hair you see that I have here, his fault. He gave them to me. Jessica, let me. So let's go to the critical thinking because I know Roberto likes very much to deal with critical thinking. I too remember that I started my career as a philosopher actually. So of course, critical thinking is also important for me. We already had a little bit of the critical thinking, which analysis of propositions here. The ideal training environment is the one with the lowest amount of stress. Remember that. Remember to read. You know, don't allow your brain to play tricks on you. And if you find out that yeah, my brain played a trick on me, hey, don't be afraid to, like Anna said, oh, sorry, this was my opinion yesterday, but I have another one today. This is because I'm alive. There is no problem with that. On the contrary, you know, you don't show any weakness. You only show a strength. You know that you are a rational person. So that's great. There's no problem with that. Now we have the dog-centered thing um, that it's maybe better for this part here about critical reasoning. And I wrote dog centered because everybody, well, not everybody, but most people, they understood this like speaking about dogs. And what I see is a tendency, a enormous tendency to people these days to be so dog centered. Is everything is about the dog? Is the dog is like actually this is, in my opinion, is a terrible tendency because you are putting, you know, earlier we had humans are here and then all the other creatures come under, right? Now, and then we did another thing. Then we took the dog. Hey, doggy, come here because you are also one of God's creatures. Okay, let's put it like that. So now we have the dog and the human and the dog, and then all the other creatures. All the others are just all the others. But you know what? Now we are even doing the opposite. We are putting the dog on top. Is first the dog, and then comes all the others. You know, there is the famous sentence is that there are no problem dogs, there are only problem owners, right? Something like that. And that is really too, I mean, a dog cannot do wrong. That's what, there is this philosophy now. The dog cannot do wrong. And I think, in my opinion, and I think that might be a little bit dangerous. Look, I'm a revolutionary biologist. I'm always terribly suspicious when if we suppose that one species is more special than all the others. Natural selection, the algorithm of natural selection, no, no, not probable. But let me hear what the others have to say about that. Michael, what do you think about that? The dog center, the idea, thing like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that obviously it's limited. It's a very limited idea. And I think if you take out of that we need to address our own biases when it's approaching dog behavior, then you're fine. But if you take away from that nothing the dog does is ever a problem, then you've taken something very wrong out of it. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think any of these kinds of ideas have bits of truth in them and bits of complete falsehood in them. So you got to be careful.
Yeah. Tilda, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, for me, the dog is the most important rather than the human.
What about the horse?
And the horse is also more important than the human.
What about the guinea pig?
Yes.
You don't like guinea pigs anymore?
Yes, also.
Oh, the guinea pig, okay.
But it doesn't mean that an animal cannot fail. I mean, that's a natural thing. It happens. But we also have to think of the situation we put the animals in and take them away from their natural environment and so on. Still, there can be many reasons for the problem, for whatever problem it is. And I'm not saying that it cannot be like it's not like it's only a human problem, and also it will affect the animals, so it will go both ways anyway.
You know, you mentioned we take them out of the natural environment, right? But I mean, we are all out of the natural environment, are we? I mean,
Yes.
I should be a discoverer, sailing the seven seas now. I should
Exactly.
not be sitting here behind the computer doing these things with you guys. I should be there. I can see the Atlantic Ocean right here. There is lots of miles and miles and miles, and the fair winds are blowing here. I should be out there being a discoverer. I'm out of my natural environment as well. Am I
Yeah.
not? Aren't you?
Yes, definitely.
Or are we?
Yeah.
I think this question about the natural environment is a very big, challenging question that I don't know if we have an answer to yet.
Roberto, what do you say?
Yes, the humans, they have the sense of guilty for somehow they remove the dog from the nature, and it seems that everything that we are doing is try to compensate that sense of fault, and that it eliminates completely any responsibility from the other species. If we see that, and you know better than me, in an evolutionary point of view, there's no balance on that. It's the question of givers and takers. If we only give everything, I don't know in a evolutionary point of view where this will finish.
Right.
And at the end will be the dog that will be the victim here. And then yes, we have the fault.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Roberto is referring to evolutionarily stable strategies that when we have givers and takers, one strategy cannot survive without the other because they have to keep each other at bay. It's, by the way, the ESS. You can read about more about that in several articles and even books. Go to ethology.eu. You know that because you are students, and you can find them there. Michael is a great admirer of the ESS and use it to explain lots of things, lots of behaviors, the balance that exists between opposing strategies that actually need one another. We cannot have one without the other. Anna, what do you say? Are we too dog-centered? Are we put the dog there? Dogs do can go wrong?
No, I totally agree with Roberto. I think that that is an emotional sentence.
Yes.
And by putting the dogs ahead of us, I don't think that makes any sense.
No.
We have our needs. The dogs have their needs, of course. But we have to see with critical spirit. We have to address these social interactions with critical thinking and not only with emotions. Of course, that emotions are important. That the ones that we can address, but let's not be extreme. How do you say?
Extreme.
Let's not be, yeah.
To extreme. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's not be extreme. I think you have to find a balance. If a dog has a behavior problem because we did it wrong, okay, that's our fault. But if the problem of the dog is a problem of mine, if the dog is behavior, it's displaying a behavior that is natural for the species, okay, that's fine. That's my problem if I don't like it.
Yes.
Okay, and we have to find the common sense there. I don't agree with that question.
No. Okay.
With that sentence.
Thank you very much, Anna. Can I ask? Okay, I think we had a really good discussion here. We reached kind of a conclusion too, both about stress and critical thinking. I mean, I don't think it's impossible because nothing is absolute. Everything is changing. This is what we can give you today, our conclusions. As I said, and let me emphasize that because it's important. to reach conclusions, we need input from different fields, different points of view, put everything together, find a model where those things work, and then always bear in mind that the truth of today is an error not yet discovered. And thank you very much to the tutors here, present here, Michael, Tilda, Roberto, and Anna. Unfortunately, Christine is not with us today. And Jessica, thank you very much, all of you guys. Take care. See you.
The 29th, not this coming up Tuesday, but the following Tuesday for the second episode of An Ethologist Reacts. We're going to look at some of the videos that you guys have been commenting on the group, and we should have a special guest, and it's going to be a really good program. We're looking forward to that one. So we will see you all on the 29th.